In this video, I'm going to dive a little deeper into bringing multi-tracks or loops into our session. So in the last video, episode 2, we talked about bringing your reference track in. We talked about building your click and also adding guides. And as you can see, I also added all of the markers up top. And the guides are the guides down here basically are one measure ahead of each marker, as you can see if I zoom in, except for this one got moved.
Chorus.
Well, nope, I just didn't. So as you can see, I just have to move this one bar this way. I just had it in the wrong spot. So, but anyways, yeah, the idea is that you have a one measure count in to the next part that you're playing. So I've done that already, and I can do this. The next part that I am going to show you guys is just like I said earlier, bringing the tracks into a project, especially if you've already built the tracks, or if you've purchased them from multitracks.com or Loop Community or another site. So I'm going to do that now. So I have purchased the tracks, and they are all on my. I put them neatly on my desktop in the folder, and I'm going to show you guys. Here they are right here. And what we're going to do is we need to get these multi-tracks that we purchased into our source folder, because if you remember in our videos before, we really need all of our multi-tracks to be in this source folder. As you can see right now, I've got the reference track that we put in there, and then the click and the guides, which is stock. But I have all these multi-tracks that I've purchased from multitracks.com, acoustic guitar, baritone, and it goes all the way down, and I need to take all of these tracks and put them in our source folder. So I'm just going to copy all of these, and I'm just going to drag them right into the source folder, and I'll replace because I've already done one. Okay, so as you can see, our source folder now has all of the tracks, all the multi-tracks that we're going to import into our session. And why I'm doing this is this just goes back to the proper file management system that we talked about earlier. If you do this before you start working in your project, then when you pull the files into the project, they'll always be here. You're not going to move them. Like for instance, if they were in this multi-track folder and I didn't drag them into my source folder, and I moved this multi-track folder, Logic would see a bunch of basically Logic wouldn't be able to find these tracks, and you'd have to manually locate them. So that's why good file management is really important when starting these projects early. So now that I have that, I can just disregard this. I don't need it anymore. They're all in my source folder. So with that, I'm going to go back to Logic, and I'm going to start importing these multi-tracks. So back up to our media browser, all files. I'll click this, go to desktop, Logic Pro Backtrack, and our source files, which are all here. And you can arrange these however you want, as far as how you want to make them look, but basically going to basically take these tracks and dump them into my project. Now there's a few ways to do this, and some of it comes down to, are you going to use all the tracks, or are you going to just manually insert them? It just really depends on what you're going to do. And for this particular video, I'm probably just going to manually bring the tracks in, not all at once. I like to, when I bring my tracks in, I like to really keep them grouped by instrument or or vocals, or I like to keep them together and organized. It helps when you're mixing, and it helps it helps visually. So basically we already have our click track and our reference and our guide, so those are all pretty much finished. So generally you can do this however you want. I sort of have the workflow that I like to work out of. So generally I'll bring in any drums or loops next after my guide. And there's no right or wrong way to do this, it's just preference. So I'll bring in drums, and notice that I'm just dragging and it creates a new track and actually labels the track based on what the WAV file is named. So really cool feature. It's awesome that it does this automatically so that you don't have to. So yeah, so drums, and I'm looking, I don't see any other, oh yeah, loop. So I'll bring drums and loop in together, because usually a lot of times what you'll find is if I solo this out, you'll find that generally a loop is percussive, so it makes sense to be kind of in the same area as the drums. So from there I generally like to bring in pianos or keys. So I'll bring in this piano, I'll bring in keys 1 through 4, and then notice I selected 4 tracks at the same time and drug them in, and it's asking me, do I want to create new tracks? Do I want to use existing tracks? Do I want to place all those files on one track? I want it to create new tracks. So I do that. It dumps 4 new tracks in for me, all in order. So I've got my piano and my keys all in there. And then, so basically what I have left is I have guitars, a glockenspiel, what else? And then it looks like vocals. I have an acoustic guitar and bass, but I'm not going to use those. We generally don't put a lot of acoustic or bass, unless it's synth bass, we'll put it in there, but this is just kind of how we work for a lot of our stuff. Actually, you know what, for this particular tutorial, I'll just go ahead, I'll put them all in there, that way we can work through them. So I'll do guitars next. So I'll do acoustic guitar, bass, and then the electric guitars, and I don't see any other keys, piano, yep, okay, and then I'll just drag those in. Same concept, I want to create new tracks because I want to keep them separated. So then you see the acoustic came in, the bass came in, which I'll probably put the bass first to keep all the electric / acoustic instruments together, and then the bass can be by itself. And then I've got my electric guitars, so those are all together. And then I'm just gonna drag in, I'll drag in the vocals, so baritone vocals, soprano, tenor, and background vocals. So I'll bring all those in together. Same thing, create new tracks, and all the tracks are there. Notice that when you solo a track, like I've soloed this loop, everything else is grayed out. So if you're wondering why are all these tracks grayed out and why are all the mute buttons flashing, it's because I have a track soloed. Another quick, easy step to see if something's soloed is this nice big yellow S solo icon. It's like a master solo. So if something's soloed, you can unsolo it really quick, no matter where you're at. So that's what I'm going to be working with today. And so as you can see, I have all of my tracks inserted. So I've got all 19 of my tracks ready to go. Now generally after I drag all my tracks in, or I say I built these tracks, I'm very much a color coordinated person. I like to I like my tracks to be color coordinated. It's quicker for reference, and it makes the most sense to me. So this is one of those things where you can color coordinate however you like. There's really no right or wrong way. It's completely up to you how you want to do it. So there's a few different ways to color the tracks, or to color the region. But so what I like to do is I like my reference generally to be an off color, because I'm usually not panning my reference at all when I bounce in the end for a reference track, and I'll get into that later. But so generally, if you right click, you can get into assign track color, or control click. So it's assign track color, and then you have your color palette that pops up, and you can pretty much pick whatever color you want. So for this particular one, I'll just start with like a pink. And notice that it colors this piece over here. Oops. But it doesn't color this over here. So what I want to do is I want to come into functions, and I want both of these to match. I want the wave file to reflect this over here. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to color your regions by the track color. So here's your track color, but you want to, what it's telling it to do is color your region by whatever color this is, and that's what I'm going to do. So I do that, and there you go. It's pink. And so then from there on out, I like to, my click and guide, I'll select both of these tracks just by clicking, holding shift, and clicking both of them, and then I will I'll right click or control click, assign track color, and I like my click and guide to be blue, because generally we pan these to the left because we're not doing multi-tracks in Ableton quite yet, and I'll have another video on just exporting these stems or multi-tracks. But for this instance, in this particular project, we're just going to pan left and right and have, basically a 2-channel output. Left channel being the click and the loop, and then the right channel being all of our loops that are just mixed together. So that's why I like to color my tracks, my click and my guide blue, because I know they're going to be panned left, and there's an L in blue and left, and it just makes sense to my brain. So after doing that, I'm gonna work on the basically the multi-tracks. Now, this can, like I said, this can be exactly how you want to do it. Generally, I like to group my tracks by color. So drums, I'd like all my drums to be a specific color. All the keys and piano a specific color. That just helps me in my brain to have a quick view. If I'm looking for keys, I know kind of what tracks are grouped with what. So this color scheme can be whatever you want. So my drums and my loop, I'll just start assigning. We'll do something in the purple range. Piano and all the keys, I'll select all those. Those can be something in the green range. And then the guitars, the bass and the guitars, I can assign to do something maybe in the yellow range. And then all the background vocals, I'll assign to, let's see, yellow. Orange will work. Okay, so I've colored all those, and then I'm just going to select the bottom one here, scroll to the top, drums, hold shift and click, and it selects all these tracks, and then I'm just going to do what I did before. I'm going to color the regions by the track color, and that gives me nice pretty colors for easy identification on what I'm looking for. Like I said, this can be whatever you want, however you want it to look. This sort of thing just kind of works for my brain, and but you know, Logic makes it great with all these colors. And then also notice when you click on your mixer here, all the colors will show up down here in your mixer, so that it helps you, you know, easily identify what is happening. So it just makes it a little easier to tell what's going on. So okay, so from there, the next thing that I'll do is I'll decide if we're not running multi-tracks and we just need a left, you know, if I'm just going to bounce a left and a right stereo, click and guide being on the left, panned left, and all my loops being panned right, generally I'll figure out what we need in the loop. So we'll take a look. You know, we have 5 campuses, which means we have 5 bands. So a lot of times I'll look and see, you know, kind of where we're at with, you know, do we have keys players at all our campuses, and what's going on for that particular weekend. We've since then moved to multi-tracks that allows us to just turn on and off each track depending on when you're what your needs are for the weekend, and we do that in Ableton, but that'll be a completely different tutorial video. This one is just specifically for if you have 2 channels on your soundboard, and or 2 open channels, and that's all you can you know, have, that's all you have available. This works great because it gives your bands a click and a loop, or a click and a guide on one channel, which won't be mixed in the house but sent to their in-ears, and then it gives you the right channel, which will be on your soundboard, will be another independent channel that will be just the loops you'll be able to mix in the house. So this keeps the band on, and also allows you know, just some extra oomph in the mix, and just, you know, it helps the overall sound. So so basically what I'll do next is I will pan. Actually, I don't actually pan quite yet. I know these are panned, but after I figure out, like, okay, we don't need the acoustic guitar, we don't need the bass, you know, maybe we don't need, let's see, maybe, you know, we don't need 3 electrics, because, you know, maybe we have two electrics and we only need 1 electric part in the loop. And so what I'll do is I'll decide what's the electric part that we won't play live, you know. So I'll solo. I'll solo each track and figure out, you know, what am I going to play live? What is it? Do we have 2 guitar players and all that? And then I'll mute the tracks that we don't need. So once I figure out what tracks I'm actually going to use for the mix, then I'll basically work on mixing them, because we have actually we did change the arrangement just a tad, so let me make sure that this lines up. Okay, so this technically doesn't line up, because in the last video I had to I cut just like a few small chunks off of this front half. So I'm gonna actually select all these tracks, and I'm gonna cut a little bit off of these tracks so that everything lines up properly. So I think it was roughly, so here's where the piano starts, right here, this wave, and this is where the piano starts up here. So I actually have to cut off a little bit more so that this all this isn't ideal with how I like to do things, but for this particular video, it'll be fine. So I like to zoom in. Here's verse 1. You can see we don't quite line up, so I'm just zooming in here so that we get a good. So let's try that. I'll zoom out. Oh, and I guess I should have explained all your zooms. I'm holding Option, and then I'm moving my mouse left or right which zooms into the track. Up or down actually gives you more width, or shrinks the track up or down when you're holding Option. Another way to do it is these two little guys up here. You can drag this way, and it's the same thing. But once you start learning, quick keys or hotkeys, it helps speed your process up. So let's see if all these line up.
Intro 2, 3, 4.
You can see it's lining up. Great. So it lines up. It also lines up with our reference track. So we're good to go. We know that it's lined up, that all of our tracks are where they're supposed to be. And then I'll just extend this back to the beginning. So like I said, I would probably drag this another bar forward so that I'm not cutting anything off. I'm really not cutting much of anything off the front, but I generally get pretty particular about all of the steps. So I would probably take this back and drag everything and move it a little bit, but this gives you guys a good idea of what's happening. So after we get done with that, and our loops line up with our click, and all of our cues and reference and everything is lined up. Generally, what I'll do from there is after we've decided what tracks are going to actually be in the mix, then generally what I'll do from there is I will begin to mix the loops. Now, there's a little mixer button up here, and this brings up your mixer for all your tracks. And my computer isn't really wanting to work with me here. That might be all it pulls up. You can actually detach this mixer window, or you can just have it as like a quick. It really depends. Or if you're running two monitors at home, you can detach it and have this mixer window be on another monitor. So to do that, you can go up to View, and you can, it's Window, I guess. You can open Mixer, which is Command 2. So open Mixer, and that gives us a standalone window of the mixer. So we can actually go back there and blow this up as big as we want and have a standalone. This would be good if we're running two monitors. But I'll just blow this up just so we can see what's happening and kind of go from there. So basically, I'll go ahead and mute our guide, our click, and our reference track, because all I want to hear are all our loops. And we have a ceiling that we use for our main output level. And you see my main output level here, and that ceiling is -12, which is right here. We don't generally want anything to be above -12. That's kind of the healthy mix for when we export. So what I will do is I'll play this and go ahead, and I can tell you right now this is probably going to be hot because all of my faders are pretty hot right now, but we'll see what the output is with all of these faders up high. So as you can see, -6.9 is what you're hitting. I'm gonna go ahead and pan these to the right, all of these, which I could select them all, I suppose, and pan them. Okay, so this is your left channel here and your right channel. So as you can see, this is just blowing way up. It pretty much peaked. So we know right away that all of our channels are going to need to be brought down before our bounce, basically. So I'll just select all the channels. So I just click here, and then I go over to drums. I hold Shift, and I click again, and I'll just bring them all down together. And this just gives me a better starting point for, you know, the output levels. So I'll play this, and you can see that my output has dropped drastically. Now we're topping at -14. So there's a few different ways to do this. Generally, I try to work from some of the dominant instruments first, and the instruments that I really want in the track, and then from there I'll kind of sprinkle in the other instruments. I can see in this track that the drums are really pushing the output of this mix. You can see it when just on the hits. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to mix this according to what I'm happy with, because once you mix this, mixing meaning you know, keys here, and oh, I don't like this keyboard so much, I'm going to bring it down, and this keyboard's really good, it needs to be brought up, and this piano needs to kind of be in the background, and the loop can be just background, the drums can be background. Once you mix this and you're happy with this, because this final mix that you do is what your congregation or audience is going to hear. When you get into multi-tracks and, you know, exporting stems in Ableton for multi-tracks, you don't have to worry about this, because you can mix this individually in Ableton and all that, and we'll go into that later. But we're just mixing basically all of these tracks, all these loop tracks that are panned to the right, we're mixing down into one mono track. And so you really want to be happy with this entire mix. You want to be happy with what you're hearing, and I would encourage you to listen to the mix on studio monitors. I would encourage you to bounce the mix and go listen to it in your auditoriums or your sound system, because it does change based on what you're mixing on. So a lot of it's just tuning your ear to what your system sounds like, because your studio monitors might sound completely different when you're mixing than, you know, your sound system in your church or whatever you're mixing for. So once I get this pretty much this level to where, or the mix to where I want it, I'll see where my level is, and this gives you the digital reading of your level, and then you've got, you know, you've got your meter reading here. So I can tell you right now that, you know, I need to boost my overall mix. So you can do that a couple different ways. I'm just going to do this by selecting all the tracks, because I like how they're mixed right now, and I'll select them all, and I'll bring them up, and you see my overall outputs coming up. See about getting close. See. So you'll really, you could see I brought it up to -12. This gets a little bit challenging when the dynamics in the song change or the song gets heavy. So make sure you're listening to the whole song all the way through when you mix this, because it could be happy right now at -12, but you get to the big part of the song and one of these tracks could jump 4 dB, 5 dB, and so you really have to you really have to pay attention to that stuff, because that will affect the mixes in your ears as, you know, the dynamic changes. So okay, so once I have my loops all panned and you know, how I want them, then I'll just go in and do the same thing. I'll unmute the click and the guide, and I'll actually just solo the click and the guide. That way I'm just hearing these two channels. They're panned left, so notice it only shows up on the left side now because I only have it panned left, and I'm bouncing a stereo channel when I'm done, or stereo track. The left side will be click and guide, and the right side will be loop. So what I'm going to want to do is now I need to mix in a happy level for my click and guide. Well, obviously both these tracks are way too hot, so I'm going to bring them both down so until we get a good output level here.
Intro 2, 3, 4.
So I brought them down, but I'm still hitting -8. The idea with the guide is we like to have the guide a few, maybe 2 dB hotter than the click. So generally you can go to -10 with the click on your output. So hit play, and notice on the output it's hitting negative. It's hitting. It's about -10. It's close. So I'm gonna bring it down just a little bit, and there we go, -10. So I've got -10, and then I'm going to mix the guide in.
Intro 2, 3, 4.
Bring that down a little bit.
Intro 2, 3, 4.
The guide's still a little hot. I'm bringing that down more.
Intro 2, 3, 4.
Guide's still hot.
Intro 2, 3, 4. Intro 2, 3, 4.
Okay, and I just need to bring the click down a little as well.
Intro 2, 3, 4. Intro 2, 3. Intro 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so that's I'm pretty much in the right ballpark. If you can hear it well, you can hear that the guide is elevated a little bit over the click. That helps because it's easy for the guide to get lost in your mix when you're playing live. So now I'll mute the reference because I don't want to hear the reference right now. I'm just going to play it, and I'm going to see kind of where my levels land on the left and the right side.
Intro 2, 3, 4.
So my loop is a little bit low right now. That's generally because of the dynamics of the song and there's not a lot in it. Now, you can get crazy with this and automate each track if you wanted, but I'm not going to get crazy with it. I'm just giving you guys a basic overview so you can apply these theories to your project and figure it out. So let's wait a little bit here. We'll jump in. Getting ready to come into the instrumental.
Instrumental.
So you can see it jumped, so yep, the drums are peaking it a little, or the loop's peaking it a little bit. Alright, so you get the idea. I'm pretty close, but you could spend hours mixing this, but for this video's sake, I'm not going to. So basically what we create is we create a couple different files for our volunteers to upload to Planning Center. We will bounce just a click track, and basically what the click track is it's a wave file with the click in the guide pan to the left and mixed to our -12 like you saw me do, and then our loop channels all pan to the right channel and mixed in to not exceed -12. Once I hit that, I'm ready to bounce. I'm ready to bounce these tracks, and this will be what we use for the weekend. So that click track, basically all I'll do is I will mute the reference track or mute any tracks that you don't want to hear for this bounce. And so basically I've got everything where I need it to be, and we already checked our levels. Our levels are pretty solid. I'm happy with the mix, and so then I'm gonna bounce. So we have this nice little bounce button down here, or you also have a bounce here if you choose. So I just usually bounce out of here, and this gives you this nice window. Gives you some different formats. So it gives you a wave format or an AIFF format, which is really nice. It gives you the resolution. What bit do you want it to be? The 44.1 for the sample rate, interleaved or split, and then Logic just does a great job giving you a bunch of options. Please note you don't want normalize on when you're trying to achieve a negative 12 level, because normalization basically gives you more headroom, and that will pump the volume up. So make sure normalize is off. We want offline. We want it to start. This is where you can tell it where you want it to start and where you want it to end. So it starts at 1, which is the very beginning, and then it ends at 89, 1, 4, which that would end right in this area, which I pretty much want to go to 101. So I'll just double click on this whole thing and just type in 101, and that will end at 101. And let's see, all these are pretty good. You could do 16 here, 24. You can notice that it shows you how much space that it takes depending on how high you want to go. I've noticed that you generally can't hear much of a difference going to 48 or going to 24 in the mix of things. But you know, if you want to get crazy with it, you can. It just eats up more and more space the bigger the file you get. So so what we do when we're bouncing just the click, we'll just do a wave file, and this is pretty much how it looks. So I'll go ahead and hit bounce, and it's gonna ask me where I want this bounce to go. This is important because this goes back to the project management piece that we talked about earlier. So we know we have our Logic backtrack template on our desktop already. So I just selected desktop, Logic, and then this is going to be a finalized bounce, because this is what we're going to use for the weekend service. So I'm gonna by nature put it in this finalized folder, and then obviously we have a naming convention that we talked about in the previous. You can name however you like, but this is how we do it. So this is version 1, 90.5 BPM, the key of A, and then from there we will type in click, because this is our click. So then we will bounce it, and it'll take a little bit to bounce all this in place. As you can see, it's going through. You can watch it and end. Great. So just to see if that worked, I guess, I'm going to jump to my folder here and go to finalized, and there it is. It's a WAV file. It's named correctly, and if I wanted to preview that, if you double click on it, it'll by default open in iTunes. So I'll just open it real quick.
Intro 2, 3, 4.
And it's hard to hear, but in my left speaker I hear the click and the guide, and in my right speaker I hear all the loops. So those are my two channels that I'll be able to use for the weekend, and it bounced everything that I mixed in the previous window. So everything I mixed, it bounced in place to one stereo track. So that's great. That's one file down, and that's the main file that we use. But we also go a couple steps further for planning. You know, a lot of us we use Planning Center to plan all of our services, and so we like to provide our volunteers with as many tools as possible so they're successful on a weekend. So with that said, one thing that we will do is we'll bounce a click like we just did, and then we will bounce a what's called a reference track. And what a reference track is basically the click and the guide and the reference. So all I do is actually I'll go back into our mixer window, which is Command 2. I'll open up that mixer, or you can just click here. It's really up to you, however you prefer. But I am going to mix our reference in, and what this allows our volunteers to hear the click and the guide and understand, oh, that is what the chorus is, or it's just an extra reference for them to help them plan for rehearsals and all that. So I will solo this out, And basically the idea of this is we want to normalize this, because we want to have a lot of headroom for if you're if you have Planning Center on your phone or a tablet and that doesn't have really loud speakers. You want to have that extra headroom so that so you can hear the track. So we're not going to go with the -12. We're pretty much going to normalize this, push it to 0. So I'm just going to play it, and all you're hearing right now are these 3 tracks that are soloed. So I'll just push this up. So I'll just push this up until it pretty much hits 0, and then mix it how you like it. So you want to be able to hear everything. So if I start it over.
Intro 2, 3, 4.
So maybe the reference is just a little hot. So I'll bring the reference down a little bit. So then I'll just push the output up a little bit. Really just kind of want to be in this area here. So once I'm happy with that, then I'm going to bounce it. And like I said, this is just going the extra step so that if someone wanted to understand the click and the guide and how it references the track, they're able to just listen to this. So if I wanted to do that, I would bounce it. In this, I don't need it to be a wave. When we upload to Planning Center, the universal, the universal file is MP3, and so we have some people who have Android, some people have iPhones, some people have this and that, and so this is the one file that they all seem to work with. You also have like the M4A, which is the Apple version. So if you have a small team and they all have iPhones, maybe you want to run the M4A. It's really up to you. But we run MP3s to upload to all of our Planning Center stuff. So with that, we're gonna turn our normalize back on, and we selected MP3 this time instead of a wave. Same thing. We want to end. We'll just end at 101. Joint stereo, and all that's pretty good. You can get pretty crazy and add in all that stuff. So I'm gonna bounce it. It's going to ask me where I want to put it. I'm going to do desktop finalized, because this is another track that I'm going to be uploading to Planning Center. So it's bouncing right now. And then it converts for you automatically, which is great. Love this feature in Logic. Oh, and I failed you guys already. I forgot to properly name it. So let's bounce it again, and then I'll just have it overwrite. So same thing, 101 real-time MP3. It's going to ask me where I want to put it, but this time it's not a click. This is a reference. So we want to change the name to reference, because then people know that this is just a reference file to be able to reference the actual MP3 with the click and the guide. So I'm going to put it in the same spot, and I'm actually going to, well, I'll delete the other one, but yeah, so that's the correct way to do it. I just forgot to name it, so I apologize about that. So we'll let this bounce. Great, it's done. And then it converts to MP3. The naming convention is correct. And we'll just go over to make sure that it's there. Finalized, and then it is there. So I will delete this one because I named it incorrectly. So we have a click, and then we have a reference. The only thing that we have to do is, and this is just for us, but if you are using Planning Center, this is a great way to help you along. This MP3 track is going to be a lot louder than this click wave, because you remember we bounced this click wave file to -12, which is a good healthy level for audio. And for something like this is more normalized, so this is going to be a lot louder, and this will allow for your everything from your iPhone to iPad and tablets and all that to be able to hear it better if people are listening on a mobile device. So we need to actually create this file again as an MP3 normalized to give that extra boost, so that we'll post these two files on Planning Center. So to do that, basically going to bring these back down. Let me mute this and unsolo everything. Okay, and I'm just going to play this real quick.
2, 3, 4.
And you know, click and guide and all of that are louder. They're almost hitting 0. So basically all I need to do is bring all of my tracks up to basically to normalize it. So I'll bring those up until I see like a good healthy, and I'll get kind of to the loud part in the song.
Bridge.
So you notice it's up loud. You know, so basically, you know, get up in this range, and then you know, once you're happy with that, you're just going to bounce it with the reference muted, because this is just the same click file, only it's going to be an MP3, not a wave, and it's going to be normalized. That gives us the headroom that we need for mobile devices and laptops and all that. So I'll bounce that. Same thing. This is not a reference. This is a click, but this will be an MP3, not a wave. So desktop finalized. We'll put it in this folder. We'll bounce it. And then it converts to MP3. And then we can check it. So there you go. There's our finalized. We have a reference track. We have a clicked wave track, which is, this is, you know, this is obviously, look at that, 46 megs versus 5. So this one, these are really compressed MP3s, and you know, this is what you're going to want to use for, you know, loading into however you play your click tracks, whether it's Ableton or another program. So and then you'll have, you know, your click MP3 and your reference MP3 that you can upload to Planning Center for your musicians. And so that's pretty much it. That is how to that is how to import your multi-tracks, mix them down, and bounce everything with correct levels and mixing correctly. And like I said, a lot of these will change depending on your scenario and what you need to accomplish. But this is for, you know, churches that maybe, like I said, have 2 channels on their soundboard that they can give to clicks and loops. And this still offers a nice backtrack for, you know, for your band. And it's a really good starting point. And basically a lot of people ask, well, how do you get these tracks to the sound system? It depends on how you use or what you use. We use Ableton, and we bring we basically bring this wave file into Ableton, and then we use a Cat6 cable for all of our multi-tracks. But if you have a Snake on stage, the easiest way is to just plug in, you know, the 1/8" headphone output into 2 1/4 inches, and have two direct boxes at the stage plugged into your Snake, and that's how you get your 2 channels out to the soundboard. And because they're already panned left and right, it'll automatically send the click to one channel and the loop to the other channel. because it's a stereo output on your headphone jack left and right. So we'll get into more tutorials on how to hook into your system and how to simple ways versus more complicated ways, and then we'll get into using multi-tracks and and how we archive and all that. So that's a basic instructional video on how to import multi-tracks and also mix down and bounce out a stereo track. Hopefully this is helpful to you. Make sure you are regularly saving, and I hope this helps.